Hello, Dr. Amar. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Zuhud, can you hear me?
Yes, can.
Yes.
Shall we start or should
Yep.
we wait?
No, I'm okay. I'm good to go.
Okay. Moderator, please start. But Dr. Amar, I don't see Adit yet, yeah? Has he already
he
joined?
has. Yeah, he's already joined. Aditya Kilos.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, Aditya Kilos. Okay, moderator Hanifah, please start the meeting.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Our public lecture is about to begin. Please have a nice seat. Thank you very much for preparing yourself to join our public lecture. Before we begin the event, we would like to inform you that there will be one session with one special invite speaker. During the event, there will be several rules that must be obeyed by the participant. The activity will begin exactly 10 a.m. Participants are expected to enter the Zoom meeting at least 10 minutes before the program begins. Participants must change their username into the format of name _ institution or class. The microphone must be muted all the time unless always by the moderator. Convention participants are expected to turn on the camera using. If you have any question, you can ask through the following chat box. Fill the attendance form that will be sent at the end of this event in the chat box, and don't forget to take a screenshot for proving of participating in the public lecture. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone.
Waalaikumsalam.
Respectable, the head of man of Agribusiness Department, Mr. Zuhud Rozaki, SP MAPP, PhD. The Honorable our speaker today is Dr. Amar. Dr. Amar is one of the speaker of today, and the Honorable all participants of this public lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Hanifah Fadila, the moderator of today's public lecture. I am very pleased to see you here and welcome all of you to this public lecture. Today, the public lecture is about how to make scientific paper. Without any further ado, we are going to officially open the public lecture 2022 with the opening speech from Mr. Zuhud Rozaki as a head of Department Agribusiness. Mr. Zaki, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Hanifah, as the moderator of this public lecture. Welcome, Dr. Amar. How are you, Doctor?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, and Pak Aditya. Hello, Pak Aditya.
Yes, Pak Zuhud.
Yeah, thank you for your coming. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks for all the participants who joined today. Actually, as for your information, that for students that we invite to join to this public lecture, actually we do have 290, but now still 140. Maybe it's still increasing because in the publication we state that this public lecture is compulsory for this student. But nevertheless, we can start this public lecture. And today's topic is how to make a good scientific paper, because the scientific paper is one of the main thing that students need to learn, need to understand, because in their final study in this university, in Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta, especially in Department of Agribusiness, they must write a thesis, final thesis. At that time, they must write in the scientific method or scientific writing. So they cannot write like fiction, or maybe the other, or maybe like the newspaper writing or something like that, that doesn't has any quality of the scientific. So, and then in the other opportunities, they also need to always write in the scientific method, such as they do the assignment in the lectures, and then they do like join to the competition, scientific competition. They always need to write in the scientific method or scientific writing. So it is very important our student in Department of Agribusiness UMY to understand, to have a good ability to make a good scientific writing. And Alhamdulillah, today we can invite Dr. Amar and his PhD student, Pak Aditya, to give a speech or maybe knowledge regarding how to make a good scientific paper. Because until now, maybe the knowledge that has been shared to the student only come from me and my team teaching, that actually from a local lecturer, I mean from this university. So we want to get more broader knowledge, broader experience from excellent university such as from Queensland University, that we are very happy that Dr. Amar accepted our invitation today. I think that's all is my opening speech. I hope all the students can get good knowledge today, can increase their ability to write a good scientific paper, because for the final assignment of my lecture in scientific writing course, they need to make one essay, one book chapter, that in the end of the lecture we will publish this book chapter. But not all the student book chapter will be published, only in the selected book chapter that will be published. Okay, I think that's all my opening speech. Thank you very much once again to Dr. Amar and Pak Aditya and all of the participants who joined today. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Zaki, for the interesting speech. So next we are going to hear the explanation about how to make scientific paper by Dr. Amar Abdul Aziz. And first, let me introduce our speaker. Dr. Amar Abdul Aziz is a lecturer from the School of Agriculture and Food Science, University of Queensland, Australia. Before the presentation begins, let me inform how the presentation will be gone. First, Dr. Amar Abdul Aziz will be invited to present the material. After that, there will be question and answer session and followed by conclusion. I believe all of you cannot wait for the presentation from him. So, Dr. Amar Abdul Aziz, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zuhud, for inviting me, and moderator Hanifa for introducing me in such a positive light. I'm going to share my screen. I hope you can see my presentation. You can see my presentation. It's good. Okay. So I've been invited by Dr. Zuhud to come and have a chat with you to talk about, how do I write a good scientific paper? First of all, before I start, I want to say that I'm not the best of example. Saya bukanlah contoh yang terbaik. But the experience that I've done, the experience that I've written, for example, like you, English is not my first language. I come from Malaysia, so bahasa kita sama. And for me to be able to write in English, there's this journey that I went through. And as Hanifa has indicated, I've also invited a student of mine to come and share his experience, because he's just like you, beginning to write scientific paper, although he's a couple of miles away in terms of his journey. So how do I write a good scientific paper? I'm just going to give you some general tips, or I'm going to talk about some general points in terms of how we write papers. I want to also tell you two things. Number one is that, hold on. I hope you can hear that. Can you hear the sound? Can you hear me clearly? Is everything good?
Yes, Doc.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so how do I write a good scientific paper? I'm going to start off with some general pointers or some general steps in any way. I mean, there's a lot of examples out there on the net, but I just want to talk about a few things based on my experience and how I've looked at it. See, I started off with a blank with a blank paper. Can you excuse me for 1 second? Just 1 second. Okay, I started off with a blank paper. And the reason why I start off with a blank paper is like all of you, when we start off writing our research project, we start with something blank. It's like a blank canvas. What do I write? What do I do? How do I, before we even start writing a paper, what is it that I'm going to be talking about? So the most important step when you're starting off with this blank canvas, I think, can be brought down into 3 things. Number one, or two steps. Number one is, what is this research project? What is it all about? So I want to talk about your research project first before talking about writing a paper, and then the steps in writing a journal article. I know this is about a book chapter or this is about an assignment that you have in class, but as Adit will tell you, all of my students and my PhD students, when we write a paper, we write with an understanding that we want to set our goal high. We want to write a paper that is that can be accepted in a journal article. That helps because it gives you discipline in terms of how you write. So set your goals high. So let's talk about your research project. Now, number one, when you start off with your research project with your respective lecturers, collaboration is very important. Sharing knowledge, I think this is very, very important. The reason why I have this on top is because, like I said earlier, I come from Malaysia, like most of you, and you will come to a point when you will be working with others. For those of you, not all of you will get into research. Some of you will go into research, and there will be a point in your life where you say, "Oh, I don't want to share my knowledge. I want to keep it." But that's not what you're supposed to do. Knowledge grows when you share. So collaborative research projects is something that you should be doing. Don't shy away from collaborating. And when you start off collaborating, a mentor is very important. In your classes, you have mentors such as, Dr. Zuhud. You've got your other lecturers, tenaga pelajar yang lain, that you can look up as your mentor. And you want to work collaboratively with your mentor. Number 3, which is important in your research project, is communication. Okay, you want to communicate. So for example, say Davin, I'm just looking at the name I've got here. Davin Muhammad comes to me and say, Aman, I want to do a research project. Okay, and I will sit down and we'll say, okay, what's your research project about? Okay, this is what I want to do. I want to write about agribusiness. I want to talk about digital transformation of agribusiness. And then I will say, but digital agribusiness, transformation of digital agribusiness in Indonesia is too wide. You're writing a small 3,000 word paper. You should focus more. So that communication between you and your lecturers is very important. Before even writing the paper, and here we're talking about just a research project. So mind maps, making notes, collate all the discussions that you have on the research project, finalize it. And it's very important that you have a well-designed and well-planned research, a well-designed and planned research plan. I've got planned twice there. So if you've got a well-designed and research plan, that helps with your writing of your article, right? So before you even begin writing your article, you've got to make sure that you've got a good project. And those 3 steps, collaboration, mentor, communication, helps you build that good research project. Now, in number 4, I know I've got the title heading there, says research project. You see, it says plans to write up a journal article. When you're discussing, now for some of you, this might be important, I'm not too sure, but if where it is important for you to publish, right? It doesn't matter whether if it's a journal article or a book chapter, you need to have that plan in your research plan, in your research project planning, not after. You don't plan the research project without discussing the paper. That's very, very important. So it's before and not after finishing the project. Because most, and please remember, like I said at the very beginning, I'm not the best of examples. I will give you what I think is right. Take what's good, discard what's bad. But also remember that different people will have different approaches. This is an approach that I share with my students that was shared with me with my principal advisor, and we've built on that, okay? So feel free to change it as you go along. But I feel that planning on writing a journal article or a book chapter or scientific paper has to be done while you're preparing that research project, okay? Not after, not Let's design the project first. Let's do everything. Now let's discuss how we're going to write the paper. Don't let that happen. Make it a part of your research project. Okay. Now that we've got that cleared out of the way, how do we write a good research paper or scientific paper or a book chapter? I'm going to run over 12 steps. Okay. Now, there are many steps, but I think this is one that has helped me through my journey, and it's steps that I help my students as well. So I want to share this with you. So number one, and this is very important. So remember that this planning also becomes part of your research project planning. What is the main message? Quite often when we write a paper, kita ada banyak message. We have a lot of messages. When you have too many messages, that means you have too many papers. Your aim is to write one paper, so you want to have one main message. What is it? And if you can't come up with one message, that means you're not focused enough. Now, when you have that main message, sit down with your mentor, write it in 25 words. Here's a piece of paper. Remember that blank canvas? Write no more than 25 words. 26 is too much. Stick to 25. Write down 25 words. This is my main message of my paper. If you do that, you pretty much have set sort of a boundary around what you're writing, what this paper is all about. Okay, and this is a very important step. So step number one message, write it in 25 words. And if you've got too many messages, that's too many papers. If you've got 26 words, that's too many words. Okay. Number two, once you've got your main message, and most, a lot of people say, abstract comes first in the paper, but it's the last thing you write, because once you write the paper, then you write the abstract, But in this step, I want you to start writing a working abstract, because when you write a working abstract, it makes you think. This is what my paper is about. This is what I'm going to be looking. And you want to write this. Now, some of the parts are parts where you've already done your research project, right? Because you need, what did you find? You can't find something unless you've done the research project. So this can't be part of your planning, but only after you've got your results, okay? So some parts you want to write during your research project, and some parts after you find your findings. For example, what did you find? What does it mean? What is it good for? So the second step of writing is writing a working abstract. So you sit down with your mentor, or you write it down as when I say you being the student, being the main author, the first author of your paper. Why is this? What's this study about? Why are you doing this study? What are the contexts and aims? What are the problems you're trying to address? Why is this study important? Right? 1 or 2 sentences. What method did you use? This is the problem. This is what I'm trying to solve. This is the method that I'm using. And then number 3, what did you find? This was what I found. The core results. What does it mean? Interpretation in context, in the context and aim of why you did the paper, and why is the application. So you've got a working abstract now, right? So as you can realize, working abstract is something that you can get after you've got your results. You write a working abstract. And what do you do after that? So you've got your 25 words on a piece of paper. You've got a working abstract that tells you what all this paper is about. You've got your results, you've written it, and you say, okay, I've got a working abstract. What do you do next? You write a title. Now, most of us, it'll be difficult to write, what's my title of my paper? Why are we writing a title before we even write the paper? The reason being is because this helps, the main message, the working abstract, the title helps you shape your paper. Now, some of you might find difficult to find one title. You can have an alternative, up to 3 titles, maybe 4. Your title has to be attractive, and it's got to have a direct link to your main message. Don't use boring titles. Okay, don't use simple titles like a lot of the journal articles now, and I think Adit is a very good example. When we sent our paper, they said your title is not good enough, and I want to see. I'll let him share his title later. So you want to have a good title. You want to write up the title. So now you've got a main message, you've got your abstract, you've got a title. You got to make sure that all 3 are connected. Jangan, your main message says something else, your working abstract says something else, and your title is something else. Then you've got a problem. You've got a problem. But once you've got everything in flow, what you do next is one of the most important steps in any research project, in any writing up that you do, is communicate. You communicate with your mentor, with your collaborators, and this is a reiterative process. So you've got those 3 steps. You write, and you've got your main message, your abstract, you've got your title, Send it to if I'm your supervisor, you send it to me. And then you say, Amar, here's my main message, my working abstract, and my title. What do you think? And you have that discussion. It's a reiterative process, meaning it goes through changes. And when you have consensus, so some of you will just be working with one lecturer. If you're doing a PhD project, you'll be working maybe with 2 or 3 lecturers. If you are in an advanced stage in your career, you might be working with 3, 5, 10, 20 people, and you want to send this to them, okay? And once you worked on that, you've got this communication program. The next step is to discuss another important aspect of your paper. What figures and tables do I put? Because remember, at this stage, you already have your results, you already have done your work. And here's just a rough guide, not more than 6 or 8. Some will allow you to have a lot more, but you should decide how many figures, how many tables. In total, you don't want to have more than 6 and 8 in the paper. And if you have more, you have too many. And there's a lot of journals that now allows you to go into supplementary materials, which you can say, okay, I'll chuck this into my supplementary materials, okay? So it's important that you decide. And it's got to have direct links. These figures and tables have got to have direct links with your paper, okay? So once you've decided, the legends and figures on the tables is also important. The ones at the bottom, the legends up there as well. Having it done properly, and it's got to be a standalone from the main text, meaning your legends and tables cannot be repeated in your main text, right? It's got to be standalone. It's explaining the table, and you explain about the table in your main text. And make sure that in your main text that explanation of the table is straightforward, not just repeating things that's already in the table. And then the third step is also communicate again. So once you've decided, you've got your working abstract, everything's working, you've decided on your figures and tables, you send that back again to your authors or your co-authors, and then you go through that reiterative process and come to a consensus. Now, here's the most important part of writing up a paper, and I think this is a point which I always talk to my students, and I find that in any paper, assessment, especially in their early years of their PhD, and not just PhD, because I also lecture undergraduates, postmaster students, and PhD students, S1, S2, S3. Even in S1, you do find really good papers, and you do find poor papers. And the reason why poor papers are because they don't have a skeleton. They don't start off with a skeleton. A lot of you will just sit in front of a computer and say, I'm going to write a paper, and they just continue writing a paper without thinking about what they're going to write, how they're going to write it, how they're going to put it together. So a paper skeleton, while it comes at number 8, is one of the most common mistakes that students make, including myself, when I started on writing. Think of building a house. Kamu nak bina rumah. Do you build the foundation first? Do you build the walls first? Or do you build the roof first? Which one comes first? Foundation, walls, windows, or the roof? Now, well, I'm not going to expect everyone to answer, but if you answered any one of these 3, you're all wrong. Because you start off with the blueprint first. You don't start building, you start with the blueprint, and that's what the paper skeleton is, okay? So if you think, oh, you've got to build a foundation first, then we're rushing to things. First, you have to have an architect to come in and build a paper, a blueprint or an architectural drawing of what it's going to look like. And that's what the skeleton is. It's the most important aspect. Now, what does it involve? Okay, I want to go through this because this is very important. How many words are your paper going to be? Now, for most of you doing assessment, that's dependent on your assessment. If you're writing a journal article, it could range from anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 words. 10,000 could be literature reviews. 3,000 could be direct scientific reports. 6,000 to 8,000 words are also acceptable. So that all depends, right, on the discipline, on the type of paper that you're submitting. Is it a scientific, is it a literature review, is it a original research paper? And also the target journal. Some journals will have specific requirements. So you need to figure out how many words am I going to write, right? That's your boundary. Let's say it's 3,000 words, okay? Here's 3,000 words. Then you got to decide relatively each section, how much am I going to put in? You don't just go in and write. You'll say, okay, I'm going to have 600 words in my introduction. I'm going to have 900 words in my methods. In my example here, 500, 800, and 200 in the discussion and conclusion, respectively. In total, you have 3,000 words. You cannot have an introduction with 2,000 words and your discussion with 1,000 words. Something's wrong there, right? I'm giving a very extreme example, but I see this all the time. And if you're writing a journal article, the rule of thumb is your introduction shouldn't be more than 600 to 800 words. If you've got 1,000 words, that's too many, okay, or too much. So you got to think about ratios. So for example, some of you will be breaking your results and discussion. If you have results, you have 1,000 words, and in your discussion, you have 200 words, that's a big problem there. Because what people want to read, as you can see here, discussion is about 800 words. There's a lot of emphasis on methods and discussions, okay? Very little on conclusion, because that's where you wrap things up. And methods is about 500 words. So this ratio is pretty much good. It doesn't matter. You can use this ratio for whether if it's 10,000 words or so, but remember, introduction, not more than 600 to 800. Then, as you can see, we're getting into the details. We started off how many words? How do we break down into the sections? And then we go into each of the sections and we say, how many paragraphs am I going to write in this section? How many words? Okay, this particular, I'm going to write. So here's an example, introduction. And I know this sounds, some of you say, we know all this already. But trust me, every single student that has come to me that has written every paper, this is something, this is always that's missing. We always have to go back to this. Because when you read the paper, there's no logical flow. There's no, linkage between the paragraphs. Although it's simple, it's something that people always miss, okay? So it's important, you plan the paragraphs. Let's take introduction, for example, 600 words. So you've got 50, say you do 200, 200, 200, or 100, 100, and then 200, 200. What do you write in the first 100? What do you write in the second 100? What do you write in the third 100, third 200, and then the fourth paragraph of the next 200? You've got to plan until that detail. There has got to be logical flow and evolving process. And here's another tip that I want to give in terms of paragraph planning. In your paper, your introduction, that last paragraph is one of the most important paragraphs because that sort of tells everybody what your paper is about. Okay. Now, once you've decided how many words, you want to work the details. What's going into this paragraph? What am I going to be talking about this first paragraph? If I'm writing a paper about rubber disease, I want to say, okay, my first paragraph, I'm going to talk about the importance of rubber. And then you'll have this discussion. Do I write the importance of rubber in Indonesia, or do I write the importance of rubber in the world? Do I write about, what do I write about the importance of rubber productivity, or do I write about how it's important to livelihood? So there's so many things that you got to discuss. And when you discuss, things become clearer. Okay, so work on the details of each paragraph, write notes. How many references are you going to put in there? And once you've done that, you've got a good skeleton, right? You've got a really good skeleton that tells you what paragraph you're going to do, what you're going to write in each paragraph, what the sections are going to look like, what the words are. You've got a plan. Now you can start building. But of course, before you start building, communicate. This is something that we saw in most of the steps. Communication is very important. Circulate the skeleton, send it to your co-authors, ask them for critical feedback. Now, here's what I want to talk to you about in terms of critical feedback. Some of you who will get some experience sending your articles to journal articles, you'll get responses, right? Feedbacks. Some feedbacks are good, some feedbacks are very poor, right? Some feedback are designed to tear your paper apart, right? They'll say, this is not good enough. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? What we're looking for, and this is very important, listen to me clearly. What we want is critical and constructive feedback. We want to find people, not easy. Some of you will get that, some of you won't, but don't despair. Don't be sad if you don't get someone who builds you up. Inshallah, one day you'll get someone, and most recently, a student of mine who's just published another paper, she got a terrible review on the first one, but she got a really, really good review on the third paper that helped her build the paper that said, you need to do this. You've done this, but why didn't you think about this? So those are the sort of feedback that you want. And then once you get to a consensus, you've decided, all the authors, your lecturers decide, yep, everything's good to go. Then you start writing. Can you see how many steps you have to go before you actually start writing? It's not just, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I collect the data, I sit down and I start writing. There's a lot of small little steps that goes into writing the paper to make it a really good scientific paper. So when you write the paper, you got to remember this, because you've gone through step 1 to number 9, the flow and order has already been established. It's already been structured. You've got a roadmap. If you want to go to Jakarta today, to a certain house that you've never been before, you use Google Maps, right? You use Google Maps to get there. This is your Google Map. When you're writing a paper, you need a good Google Map. To have a good Google Map, you need to have a good plan. And when you have a good plan, you've got a good Google Map, then you've got the ability to work on building blocks. You see, and this is very important, right? Because you've got introduction. Remember I said we broke our introduction earlier into 4 sections, 100 words, 200, 200. You now can work on this paragraph, and then maybe, you know, when this doesn't sound too right, okay, I'm stuck in my second paragraph, but I can go into my final paragraph and work. So you have made building blocks that you can go around. So some parts are easy to write, some parts are tough to write. But when you get to the tough part, it doesn't stop you writing the whole paper. Okay, so that's very important, and it's a really, really important trick, because if you think of a paper as a whole paper, then you're going to get stuck. But if you think of the paper as building blocks, it makes it easier for you to write. Okay, so it helps when you get stuck in certain parts, especially. So start writing the paragraphs, and then when you finish, so you've now got a final product or final draft, not the final product, but a final draft. You get that final draft. Remember that abstract that you started working in step number 2. Now you revise that working abstract, because as you write, you will see that, and this is very important. Another message I always send my PhD students who comes in and think, I want to do this research, and they expect that research to follow through and will be the same for the next 3 or 4 years. It's not, because research is what research is. It changes direction. You read more, you learn more, things become different. So as your working abstract that you wrote in number 2 earlier will change, because you may have written something and you find, oh, you know, I take this direction, that direction. So what you do now, revisit the abstract, rewrite it to your final structure and content of your paper. And then, of course, step number 12, communicate. So communication is important in every step, and you want to communicate in each step. If, my dear students, wahai anak-anak murid, kalau kamu sentiasa hantar, here's my final draft, then you're doing something wrong. You should be communicating at all these different phases. Because when you communicate at all these different phases, it's like building a house. You don't build a house and you call the architect or, you know, the certification to come in. Can you please certify my house? Some of you might not have experience in building houses. I have a little bit of experience, but you know, when you do a foundation, they come and check your foundation before you can start off. You know, there's always checks and balances across. So writing a paper is no different than building a house. Have a good plan, always check stuff, and always communicate. When you're building a house, you got to communicate with the electrician. You got to communicate with the guy who's building the roof. You got to communicate the guy who's plastering and painting. It's the same thing as writing a paper. Okay, so there, my dear students, is a way that you can use to write your paper, and I hope I've given you some insights in terms of. I want to share some tips with you, tips that I have learned across my writing journey. But before I share my trip, I've got a mystery guest. Okay, the reason why I want to invite, but he's already been introduced, so he's no longer a mystery. He's only a mystery in the sense of we don't know where he comes from, we don't know what he does. So I want to introduce him, if that's okay. Aditya Kilos, or Kiloes, I hope I got that right, Adit, works with the Ministry of Agriculture. He came to me many years ago, 4 years ago. This was in maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I went to Jakarta, and he wanted to do his PhD with me. So I said, Adit, I'm in Jakarta. So he lives in Bogor. He works in Bogor. He says, okay, I'll come down to Jakarta. So he came down to see me in Jakarta, drove all the way down to see me in Jakarta. We had a chat. And he said, I want to do this. I want to do this. And I said, you know, we had a quick chat in the car. And I remembered him dropping me off. We said, okay, Adit, you can focus on what you want to try and do. And he did that. And Adit has been very lucky that, you know, throughout our conversation, he's a very hardworking student. And I'm not shy to say that. I always tell him that. Very, very hardworking. He's like my right-hand man now. I lost most of my right-hand man and woman. Banyak udah habis. Tapi Adit belum habis lagi. Jadi dia masih tolong saya, bantu saya. He got a UQ scholarship. He got a UQ scholarship. And when he came, he had problems of writing because Adit and I've asked him for his permission to share his story with you today. Adit writes his paper using direct translation. Jadi Adit dah senyum, ada bagus. Adit, jadi kalau Adit kata saya susah makan, say I difficult to eat, you know, something like that. Not literally like that, but a lot of direct translation because he has been used to writing scientific paper in Bahasa Indonesia. Now he has to up his skill to write it in English. So I am going to invite Adit. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now for a while. I'm going to invite Adit to share with you so that you all can relate. Jadi jadi saya akan cakap bahasa Indonesia sebentar. Reason yang pertama yang saya nak bawa Adit ni supaya adik-adik sekalian boleh share. You can share the experience because Adit has gone through what all of you is going through now, and I want you to listen to him and what did he go through? What did he learn? What was his difficulty? Adit biasa tulis bahasa Indonesia saja. When he came to UQ and he got a UQ scholarship, he now has to write a scientific paper in English. What was his struggle? Adit, can you share with us? And maybe you can share some tips with this, young minds. Inshallah. Okay, all the best.
Yes,
all yours,
thank you,
Adit.
Dr. Amar. Thank you, Dr. Amar. Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hang on a minute. I will share my screen. Okay, as Dr. Amar already introduced me, and Pak Suhud also already introduced me. My name is Aditya Kilus. You read it as Kilus, yeah. I'm a PhD student in the School of Agriculture and Food Science in the University of Queensland. I'm one of the Dr. Amar students. This is my final year doing my PhD, and in no more than 2 hours ago, Dr. Amar called me. He asked me to share my experience in writing a scientific paper. So I want to share my experience to all of you here. And in Indonesia, I work as a researcher in the Indonesian Center for Horticulture Research and Development in Bogor, Puslitbang Hortikultura, Pusat Penelitian dan Pengembangan Hortikultura, under one of the research institute under the Ministry of Agriculture. Currently in the process of moving to breed. Yeah. So I will share my experience in writing a scientific paper. So one of my motivation in writing, first because the drama taught me to, but other reason is because I'm a researcher. I sometimes often liken the researchers to a rock star. We both have to create a masterpiece that is accepted and liked by our fans. So sometimes I also have to present in front of many people, which I often describe as a stage to express myself. And also, since I'm a researcher in Puslitbang Hortikultura, of course, I need to get credit for my promotion. Researcher get credit from the number of articles that have been published. So that's my motivation to writing a scientific paper. In Indonesia, if no one else says, I can say for myself that I'm the most productive researcher in my office. I have written many papers in Bahasa Indonesia and have been published in several journals in the Indonesian National Journal. I also have written a lot of several international seminars held by Indonesian institutions. But when I arrived at UQ, I saw that the conditions were completely different. I just saw that, oh, this is the international scientific world. So it's completely different with the condition in my institution, even though I work as a researcher. So my first paper is a systematic review paper. It's a review paper, something that I had never learned before, even in my office. Something that often missing when I did my research in Indonesia, which is looking back on what has been done in the previous research. This is a very interesting method, but since I've never done it, I'm having lots of trouble with this. My problem in writing, of course, is about English, because I'm not the English speaker. Saya juga orang Indonesia, As Dr. Amar already mentioned before, my problem, direct translate. But here I also find that what I often do in my office before is mostly unacceptable in writing international scientific papers. So many of my writing is, that I'm already mentioned, is Indonesian English. Jadi bahasa Indonesia yang diinggriskan, gitu. Itu yang kadang tidak bisa unacceptable in international scientific paper. As a result, from when I first time I wrote my paper, draft of my paper, until the paper was published, it took times up to 3 years. So Dr. Amar and I often have a joke around. He said that, Adit, your paper's draft is older than my youngest son, because my paper's draft is 3 years old already. And Dr. Amar often gets angry with me. Of course, I realize that this is constructive for me personally. There are some tips that I might able to share with you in this opportunity in writing international scientific paper, other than the Amar technically already explained before. So what you need to do in writing a scientific paper. First, read a lot of paper. One thing that I've learned, and often Dr. Amar also tell this, in writing one sentence, sometimes we need many references. It could be that we need to read dozens of paper just only to write one single sentence. Here, we need to write our own sentence based on our understanding of those dozens paper, of course, without changing the original meaning about the explanation of definition, for example. It is also to avoid the plagiarism problem, yeah. And the second thing, avoid direct translate. Of course, Google Translate is a very helpful tool. But sometimes the translation that they give, the Google Translate give to us, is not suitable to be put in the scientific publication. Back again to point one earlier, with myself reading a lot of papers, you can find how a sentence is used in a paper. So we, rather than only using the Google Translate, we can also use many references. Of course, there are also several tools that can be used, and they are available online, such as WordHippo, Hypercollocation, Ludwig, FreshBank, and yeah, you can Google yourself. There's lots of tools that you can use to avoid this direct translate. Yeah, so jadi jangan bahasa Indonesia yang diinggriskan, gitu. So, and then the next thing that you need to do, position yourself as a reader. It is the responsibility of the writer, of yourself who write the paper, to make sure that all readers understand what you are writing. In this case, you must position yourself as a reader to ensure that you yourself understand what you are writing. Because sometimes you just write flowing like a water without knowing the true meaning of what we have written. As Dr. Amar mentioned also in his presentation before about the skeletonized paper is related to this. Sometimes that's also my mistakes. Sometimes I only writing without understanding what I have written. And then the next thing is involve your peers. One way to make sure your writing what you have written is understandable is to get other people to read your writing. In my first paper, I also involved 2 of my PhD friends to read my papers. I involved them in my paper. This is also what Dr. Amar already tell us before, is to collaborate with others. And then the last thing is pay attention to detail. This is what Dr. Amar always angry with me. I also realized that sometimes I do not pay attention to details. Often I found some errors in my papers that can change the meaning of my paper significantly. For example, like in the graph I mentioned 5, but in the explanation in the paper I write 6 or something like that. Of course, we don't want this thing happen in our papers. And finally, Alhamdulillah, my very first international publication has been published online in the International Journal of Food Science and Technology, right exactly at the end of 2021, after 3 years. I'm very happy because this is my very, very first international publication in a journal and in an international journal, and also because of the guidance from Dr. Amar, I can publish it in the high reputable international journal. This is one thing that makes me very happy because I can contribute to my office in Indonesia during the transition to BRIN. At least there is one researcher from Puslitbang Hortikultura who can bring up the name of Puslitbang Hortikultura in the Q1 journal. And one thing that also makes me happy is that I can finally bring up my family name internationally, Kilus. Now, finally, I would like to say to you that if I can do this, I'm sure all of you can do this also. That's all from me, Tatama. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Adit. If you can stop sharing, thank you so much. If you can just give me a second, I'm going to reshare my screen. Just a sec. Okay. Thank you very much, Adit. A lot of the tips that you have said has actually taken from the tips that I wanted to share, which were very, very spot on. Adit has come a very, very long way. And I think one of the most interesting thing is that, like he mentioned, so my third son, his paper is older than my third son. Can you imagine? So my son is going to turn 3, inshallah, soon in March. And Adit's paper is longer than that. And imagine how long we worked on this paper. It's a long journey, but patience is a virtue. So that's something that we all need to do. We have to be patient. Paper is something that you shape, you don't rush. Okay. Now, before I finish, I hope you can see my screen. I just want to share some tips with you, some which Adit has already touched, which I'm very, very happy because some of the things that he touched, and as you can see how Adit, I gave him a 2-hour notice. I said, Adit, I need you to come in and present, and look at how beautiful it is done in slides. So all of us have got strength. All of us have got strength. Adit is my minister of audio visual. So normally all my slides that you see in Muhammadiyah or Bogo, I get Adit to do for me. So my slides today is very boring. So Adit has got a skill of presenting his data. What he needs to build on now is how do I write and communicate with the readers, okay? And that's, I think all of you will have some skills that you can harness, but the ones that you've got to work on, like maybe writing, that's something that takes time. So discipline, it's very, very important. You have to have the discipline. Discipline to read, those are some of the tips that are coming, but discipline to follow a plan. Remember the 12 steps I said earlier? Be disciplined. Don't say, I know how to write a paper, I'll go write. And what I find quite often is those that say, I don't need a plan, I know I can write, I've been writing all my life. Your paper is not going to be readable because nobody's going to understand. There's no structure to it. So remember, when you're writing a paper, think of building a house. It's a similar process. Strategic repetition of main message. So we spoke about how your introduction, results, your conclusion. If your main message, that 25 words that you start earlier, make sure that it is repeated throughout your sections, okay? Strategic, not continuously repeating, but strategic repetition of main message. And if you can see here, I didn't say messages, I said message. Now, the other tip is that some of you will have this, if you're going to be writing a paper, do I combine my results and discussion? Do I keep it separate? For myself, I find it difficult because English is not my first language. When I have to separate results and discussion, I find it so hard. So quite often, most of my paper, I have my results and discussion together. But depending on the journal, sometimes you need to do that. So you need to have those, you need to be able to, one of the ways is to read a lot. And that's where you come to this point number 4. Work on the use of the English language. There's no shortcuts. You got to read, you got to read, you got to read. And Adit has mentioned that multiple times. Read. And writing a single sentence in your paper is not easy. I take weeks sometimes to write a paragraph. And you're thinking, what? How, you know why? Because you don't want to get it wrong. You want to use the terms right. You want to look at examples of how people have written it, not copy and paste, paraphrase. and look, oh, this is how you use the word GDP growth, or this is how do you use the word value chains or governance. So some terms, some words are easy, some words we've never used before. So you got to read 20 papers to finally understand how you use that term. Okay, so careful of direct translation. Adit, you did a good job there, and I'm very proud of you, Adit, because you touched on most of the stuff. You've learned something, alhamdulillah. Number 5 here, pay attention to detail. That's and Adit has written exactly the same way. It's not that we planned to write the same. He did his own slides, I did my own slide. And why he raised this is because every meeting I have with my students, this is the one thing that I always try and pay attention to detail. Full stops, comma, capital letter. Go and find out. Don't make simple mistakes. Why? What's wrong with this? It's not just the spelling that's wrong. There's an extra space between to and detail. Make sure that your papers don't have mistakes. Work hard, double read, proofread it multiple times. Because why? If you are going to submit a paper to a journal article, there's a mistake in your cover letter, spelling the editor's name wrong, they're just going to chuck it in. Why? If I was the editor and you spelled my name A-M-A-R, dear Professor, so I'm not a professor yet, dear Dr. Amar, A-M-A-R, here's my paper, blah, 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 and I'm going to chuck it in the bin. Why? You can't even spell my name right. Why would I take the time to read your paper? I'm sure that your paper, even though your paper might be good, I'm already having a perception. This person can't even go into the internet to look at how to spell my name. How could this person write a good paper? Okay, so don't make mistakes. Pay attention to detail. Up to the full stop, comma, spelling mistakes, every single thing, cover letter, abstract, and everything. Make sure that it's right. Now, if you're going to be submitting to journals, I know that some of you, this might be important for some, not for some. Always read the author guidelines. So for those of you in the class, agribusiness class, read your assessment course and the assessment details, the criteria, your assessment criteria. What does it require you to do? Make sure you fill it. Okay. Make sure you write it next to you. What are my assessment criteria? If you're going for a journal, what's the scope of this journal? What's the author guidelines? What are the font? How many letters in the word? All those different things you need to understand. So read that. And I think more than important, it's all about the readers. It's not about you. Okay. You understand what you've done. You've done things for 3 years. And this is what I tell Adit and my other students. You've done this thing for 3-4 years. You know what you're talking about. But a reader who comes from nowhere and picks up your paper, they need to understand. So it's not about you telling them. It's about you telling them in simple language what you've done, that you want to share this experience with them. Okay. So when you write your paper, think about the readers. It's not about you. It's about the readers. Last, but the most important point, my dear fellow students, anak-anak murid yang mulia semua ni, jadi yang paling penting, and this is a point that I always share with also with my students, and when they go back, I think this is a mind shift, a shift in our mindset. Please, when you go and become researchers, you become PhD, you become lecturers, you become directors and stuff like that, share. Muafakat membawa berkat. Collaborate. Work together. Knowledge can only grow when we share. I come from Malaysia. I'm not going to be shy to say this. In Malaysia, I not going to mention universities, went to university, and my colleague, who's a Westerner, said to me, I don't think you can survive in this university. Because what happens there, and this is very weird, I find this very weird. I see exchange and knowledge in Western countries like Australia lagi banyak lagi daripada negara-negara seperti Indonesia, Malaysia. Whereas this is where we're supposed to be seeing a lot more collaborative nature within our nations, but we're not seeing that. Let's not just talk about Indonesia within Indonesia, Malaysia. There's also, we better not collaborate because then they'll know our secret. There's no secrets. So muafakat tu membawa berkat. If you want to write good papers, you want to be a good researcher, you want to be a good individual, share. Share your knowledge. Don't be shy to share your knowledge. It will only increase. With that, I'm going to give you some useful resources. I'll share, Zod, I will share this slide with you so that the students can have this slide. use this. This is very important. This Ludwig Guru ni, learn. I've given you this for you to learn, not copy and paste. If you type GDP growth, for example, it'll tell you a couple of examples of how to use the word GDP growth. Not for you to copy and paste, but for you to get a feel of how to use it. So Ludwig Guru is a very good, and this was shown to me by my PhD student. And I want to share that with you today. So Ludwig, the number one. Now, if you go into the internet, you'll find all this. So I've given you, and I've got two Nature, and Nature is one of the best journal articles. If you're a researcher, you want to be publishing in Nature. There's two, how to write good papers from Nature. There's three from Elsevier, and I've got one from Taylor and Francis as well. So here are a lot of useful tools, and you'll find that they all have the same message. Okay, they'll all have the same message. It'll all be the same things. Now, I want you to read number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, because in my talk today, I'm not talking about the finer details. For example, numbers from 1 to 9, you don't put 1. You got to spell it O-N-E. You don't put 1. So there are a lot of rules and regulations in writing scientific paper. Another example could be some journals will expect, some journals will be okay with you writing, we found that. So some journals are okay. Some journals, they don't like you using that we or I or our research shows this. So there's a lot of finer details in terms of writing, how you write numbers and how you write that. I don't want to go through that today. But here I've given you some examples. But Ludwig is a good one for you to have a look. Right up top at number 1. Like if you have a word like value chain or some words that you've never used before and you want to understand how to put it in a sentence, this will give you some examples. So with that, I thank you very much. I think I'm right on time. 1 hour. I told Zuhud that I'd give you a 1 hour lecture today. I'd like to thank Zuhud, University Muhammadiyah Jakarta, for inviting me. It's always been a pleasure. I'm always eager to share with young minds. Don't be afraid to reach out to me. Some of you, in the later years, you want to talk to me. Don't be afraid to reach out to me. My email, you can always just search, Google me in UQ Amar SAFS School of Agriculture and Food Sciences. You'll find my email. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to get you all connected to my other PhD students in the future if you guys want to do anything. And Zuhud, terima kasih. And as well the moderator for introducing me today. I hope I've shared some tips that would be useful in completing your assessment. So Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Wait for your questions. Thank you.
Hello, Shifa, can you replace Hanifa?
Okay, Pak. Thank you very much, Dr. Ammar Abdul Aziz, for giving us such informative and interesting presentation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have already a question here.
Yes, is there any question, Shifa? Hello everyone, is there any question for Dr. Ammar and Pak Aditya? You can put your question in the chat box, or maybe you can raise your hand and then ask directly. Maybe
don't be shy.
Yeah, I want to say that, Doc.
Don't be shy. It's good that you ask. Kalau kamu senyap, if you're quiet and you don't ask, and then you don't take the opportunity, you will forever be quiet.
Yeah.
So,
I agree that, Doc.
Seize the opportunity. I think that's one of the things that we need to change. Kita harus berani. Jadi siapa yang nak jadi berani nih?
In bahasa also okay ya. Jadi teman-teman kalau mau tanya dalam bahasa Indonesia tidak apa-apa. Silakan tanya apapun. Mungkin terkait dengan book chapternya atau apa. Silakan mau tanya.
Ya,
Halo,
boleh.
teman-teman.
Teman-teman malu nampaknya semua.
Malu nih pakai
Teman-teman sama ada malu atau tengah tidur nih?
Maybe they just join and then leave. Oke, Wahyu Fikri ya. Wahyu Fikri, please. Bisa bahasa Indonesia, bisa bahasa Inggris, silakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
My name is Wahyu Fikri Aska. I want to ask tentang bagaimana cara kita itu untuk membangun mentalitas. Kan mungkin tadi kayak sudah disinggung sedikit bagaimana membangun mentalitas dalam menulis ilmiah. Kadang-kadang kita takut dalam apa gimana gitu. Mungkin itu sekian dari saya.
Oke. Adit, mentalitas maksudnya kan Adit? Mentality?
Mentality, yes.
Yeah.
How to build a mentality.
Okay. Okay, Wahyu, that's a very good question. How do I build a mentality? Bagaimana mentalitas untuk menulis scientific paper? Saya rasa Wahyu, jawapannya gini. Jawapannya tak ada yang pendek, tak ada rahsia, tak ada kita boleh minum apa namanya kalau di Indonesia dipanggil tuh? Minum-minum yang ubat-ubat. Jamu ya, enggak ada jamu yang boleh kita tulis terus ya. Untuk membina mentalitas untuk menulis ilmiah ni, kalau saya satu perkataannya baca, reading a lot, membaca sebab you will never be able to. It's a process. Ia adalah satu proses yang panjang. Okay, Wahyu. Jadi jika sekiranya kamu ingin if you want to step into, if you want to take the first step into building your mentality in terms of writing scientific papers untuk menulis ilmiah ni, kamu harus bersedia untuk proses yang panjang. Dia nggak ada yang pendek, nggak ada shortcut. I think that's the one thing that I want to tell everybody. There's no shortcut. Writing, and you will never be good in the first paper that you write, and it's okay. Nggak apa-apa, no problem. Because it's a learning process. Learning process maksudnya kamu harus jatuh, bangun, jatuh, bangun, jatuh, bangun, jatuh, bangun. Dan makin lama kamu jatuh tuh, dan jatuh yang pertama ke jatuh yang kedua mungkin dapat kan, tapi mungkin jatuh ke 10 sampai ke 11 makin lebar, makin jauh. So be prepared bersedia untuk bekerja keras. Jadi mentalitas yang that's the only advice that I can give you is that be prepared. A lot of hard work needs to go into writing papers, and jangan sekali-kali menyerah kalah. Jangan sedih. Contoh, saya nak bagi tahu satu cerita, Wahyu. Adit, papernya yang pertama Adit dihantar banyak tempat. Akhirnya alhamdulillah diterima. Paper saya nggak dihantar, terus ditendang. Masa ditendang meaning rejected. My paper was rejected. Okay, my paper. This was 10 years ago. Rejected. And in my rejection letter, the editor wrote, "What sort of paper is this? Ini paper apa ini? Ini bukan scientific paper ini. Ini paper tak guna. Di paper saya harus koyak gitu." Jadi kamu bayangkan saya macam mana perasaan saya yang pertama kali ini baru tulis. Saya udah nggak ada confident. When I was writing, I said, when I look at the scientific papers, I told myself, I will never ever be able to write a scientific paper. I told myself 2010, and I told my supervisor I don't want to write scientific papers. Alhamdulillah, today I've already got about 30 something odd scientific papers in my name. And the reason being is because when I fell, masa yang saya udah di reject kan, I had peers. Jadi samalah bahasanya kan, kalau kamu duduk dengan orang yang baju besi, yang selalu pukul besi, kamu pun akan dapat hitam kan? Hitaman pasal dipukul besi selalu kan? Jadi you want to surround yourself with good friends. Friends that wants to write papers, friends that can help you build. That's very, very important as well. Those are some of the important things that you need to do. But the most important thing is itulah, perjalanannya jauh, it's an evolution, it takes time. So don't worry if you fail. Because you will fail. A lot of you will not fail, bukan gagal, a lot of you will not be able to write something good in the first. But as you go along, you want to see progress. If you don't see progress, that means you are not preparing yourself. I hope, saya harap saya dapat bantu sedikit gitu, Wahyu.
Yeah, Wahyu, okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Wahyu, for the question.
Okay.
Siapa lagi yang berani?
Next question come from Davin Doc, but in the chat box.
Okay.
I have a question. What should we do when we got stuck while writing our paper? Got stuck in the middle, ya.
Oh, itu jadi udah tadi saya bilang yang pertama tadi kan, we are building blocks, okay? So that's the strategy before getting stuck. Okay, before getting stuck is that you follow those steps so that you have building blocks, so that you, if you get stuck in one paragraph, you can go around to another paragraph. Okay, that's the objective of writing your paper in like building blocks. Now, if you do get stuck and you can't go anywhere, different people will have different approaches. I always suggest, like Adit dengan other students, is to leave the paper for a couple of days. Leave it. So when I say leave a paper for a couple of days, that means you don't do this last minute. That means you need to have time to write papers. You want to leave the paper completely. Go away, do something else. So my PhD students quite often are working on 2 or 3 or 4. Adit, how many papers are you working on at the moment?
6.
6 papers, mashallah.
5.
5. Because one already done.
One already published. Yeah.
And when we say working 5, he's working on 5 simultaneously. And the reason why I encourage students to work on multiple papers, I know that in your case, most of you are not writing multiple papers. But if you're doing a PhD, the reason why you write multiple things is so that you can jump from one to another and completely forget. And when you come back and you read that paper, you will see it in different light. Sometimes you will read it and you say, hey, what am I writing here? I don't understand. Because you are coming as a new reader. You've forgotten what you've written, you're reading, and then you say, I don't understand it. That means you've not written a good paper. So that's one of a tip that I can give you, is to walk away, do something else, and come back later. And sometimes have discussions with your mentor. Discuss, this is where I'm stuck. How do we do it? And a discussion, inshallah, it's always like this. When you get stuck, and this is what I find, when you have discussion, something good will always come up. Something good will come up from that discussion, because you are both, whether if it's 1 person, 2 person, 3 person, somebody will come up with ideas, and then you all say, yeah, that's a good idea, let's put it. And then it helps you to move on. Those are anything that you do? Any tips that you know? If you get stuck?
Yeah. If I get stuck, because I work on 6 paper, 5 now. If I get stuck in one paper, I go to another paper. But if I really sometimes you feel like you get really boring, and sometimes just take a break. Open your Netflix, something like that. But you need to make sure that you will come back to your paper after a couple of hours.
Yeah. And read. Because you get ideas from reading. Reading is important. Baca ni penting. Ikra. Baca. Okay, lagi? Any other question?
Okay. Next question come from Ritma Ratri. How to make a good paraphrase? Paraphrase? Because it is like a phenomenon in the undergraduate student. I don't know in other country, but in Indonesia, they usually do the assignment only copy paste from the internet or from the other source doc. So maybe how to paraphrase?
I know this is not an answer that anybody wants to hear. But there is no short answer. Gak ada jamu ni. Sebab to paraphrase, you need to understand English. If you understand English, then you can paraphrase. If you can't work on your English, you can't paraphrase. Simple as that. It's a very hard truth, but that means you have no option, because copy and paste should not be an option. All of you shouldn't be an option. Salah tu. Bukan saya salah dari sisi, salah dari segala sisi lah. Kalau nak di copy and paste itu tak boleh buat kan. Maybe 1 or 2 sentences is okay. Sometimes you do that, that's fine. But once you start having a lot, you come to UQ. UQ has got, they check your similarities and stuff. Immediately they'll know where it comes from. You copy and paste, you're going to get caught. So for some of you who are going to go to, do you have checks in Zuhud? Ada check nggak di Indonesia? Di UMW?
Yes, Doc. Yes.
Ada ya?
Actually,
Okay, okay.
for the final thesis, their
Yeah.
similarity index using Turnitin maximum is 19%.
Okay, that's good. 19% is good. But then you still have people copy pasting paragraphs and stuff.
Yeah. Still.
Yeah. Okay. So there's no solution to that except for you to read. So here's an example. I gave you that Ludwig just now. Ludwig is a good example. It'll give you, let's say you say GDP growth, right? So can I share my screen for 1 second?
Yes, Doc.
I'm just going to I'm going to share my screen just for 1 second. I just want to give you an example so that you guys know what I'm talking about. Okay, just 1 second. That red one, as you can you see my screen?
Yes, Doc. Yes.
That red one is Adit climbing, writing a paper. I'm the blue one watching at the bottom, making sure that he climbs well. Hold on, I'm going to show you. I just want to show you this, which is I think is very important, so that you guys can have a look at it. And I think this will help you paraphrase for the. Okay. Can you see my? Can you see my?
Yes, Doc. Can.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's say value chain. Value chain. This is for the agribusiness, kan?
Yes, Doc. Correct.
Okay. Value chain analysis. How do you use value chain analysis? So it gives you an idea. See, mapping is usually the first step in value chain. Value chain is divided into 2 areas. So this gives you an idea of how they use the word value chain. Okay. Now you don't copy and paste. Don't copy the sentence and put it into your paper. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to help you. So I think what is very important for all the students is first realize that there's no shortcut. There's no shortcut to writing a good paper. You have to understand English. I want to give you a second one. I want to give you a second example. When I was doing my PhD before, we used to share each other's paper. We used to look at each other's presentation. There was this student that wrote a paper while she had her dictionary on her table, dictionary on her other screen, and she was a Chinese student. She could not write English, but she was very, very hardworking until the point her 45 minutes presentation was all memorized. Memorized word for word English. You bayangkan. You imagine how hard she works. So if you want to write good, and she can write papers now. She's with UQ. I don't know, Adit has not met her, but she's helped one of my students from IPB, Institute Pertanian Bogor. Dia dah tolong one of my students. And I remembered her when we had a chat. We laughed at each other because I remembered seeing her trying to write. So you got to work hard. You got to work really, really hard. If you want to write, if you want to go to research, nothing is impossible. Everybody can do it, inshallah. Cuma kena kerja keras. How do you learn? You read papers, say if you're interested in value chain analysis, download 1 or 2 or 3 papers that is highly cited. Read it multiple times until you can understand word for word, sentence by sentence. And then look at Ludwig, for example, if you wanted to look at how they use it. And once you read, you will realize that paraphrasing becomes much easier, because when you read, it's like putting tools in your box. Here's your box. You read, the more tools you put in your box, the more tools. And when you want to paraphrase, you got a lot of tools, it's easier for you to paraphrase. But if you haven't read, if you don't understand English, there's no way you're going to be able to paraphrase. Okay? So hard work. Not the answer that you're waiting for, but that's it.
Yes, maybe we need to do more practice, yeah, Doc, yeah.
Yes. Practice and reading and you know, and you know what? To tell you the truth, Adit, kamu tell them why your paper has taken 3 years. Why don't you tell them? Maybe that's something that's hidden.
Yeah, because saya in bahasa kadang saya kenapa paper saya itu bisa sampai paling tua di sini itu draftnya, karena kadang saya susah memparafrasekan. Jadi pernah saya menemukan ada pengalaman, saya coba memparafrasekan, begitu saya presentasikan, ternyata artinya beda. Gitu. Ternyata completely different the meaning. The meaning is completely different. Itu kenapa Dr. Ahmad selalu bilang baca, read, selalu read many papers, read lots of papers, just only to create one single sentence.
That's it.
It takes
Even
time.
one single
It takes
sentence.
time. Yeah, it takes time, but hasilnya pasti nanti ada, gitu.
Insyaallah. Ini hasilnya udah ada, Adik. Kalau jadi
ada.
itu sebabnya saya panggil Adit hari ni. Jadi sebab kebanyakan kamu mungkin akan dengar ni kata Allah, lama ni nak buat ni, mana ada I won't have the time to do this. But here's an example, someone who took 3 years to write one single paper. The other reason why it was a long time was that, Adit, how do we work, Adit? We go sentence by sentence by sentence by sentence by sentence by sentence. Every single word, he sits with me and I sit with him and we go through it. Because I'm a believer. Now, this is not going to be easy for everyone. Okay, ini bukan untuk semua. Contohnya, saya percaya kalau Adit bagi saya paper, saya komentar, Adit ni nggak bagus, Adit ni nggak bagus, Adit ni nggak bagus. Sampai bila Adit nggak belajar? Jadi, and ini susah. Sebab kalau undergraduate, I can't do this. But with PhD, I can do this because I only have 6 PhD students or 10 PhD students. But undergraduates, you have 200. There's no way that you can talk to 200 students. But when you get to a point, if you have a good mentor, you have somebody who can speak English, you want to work and sit down and write with them because that's the only way you're going to learn. Itu je cara yang nak belajar. So to paraphrase, simple answer, you got to read and work really hard. And that will make your paraphrasing, and you will see that as you get along, things become easier for you to write. And you can see the difference in your writing. Any other questions?
Yes, next question come from Maimuna Suryati. So the question is, what is the most difficult thing when writing an article?
I like your question. I like, apa yang paling susah sekali untuk tulis bila dalam tulis artikel? I think writing the article is the most difficult thing. That's a tough one. So for us, I guess jawapan ni berbeza-beza pada orang lain kan. So for some of you will be the most difficult thing is for me. For example, I say the most difficult thing for him is to write in English because he knows what he wants to write. All of you are all smart. Saya nggak kata kamu nggak pandai tulis. Nggak. The problem with us, and then saya kata bukan problem with you, but the problem with us, including myself, is English is not our first language. If we were to be able to communicate, and the word is this, to articulate, okay? Articulate, itu perkataan yang penting tu. How do I articulate a point? Or how do I articulate? Bagaimana saya menyampaikan point saya? Kalau di dalam bahasa Indonesia, mudah sangat saya nak terangkan, nak bagi tahu, cantik. In scientific word also I can write. But I think the biggest problem is how do we then use the English language to have the same impact, the same articulation. How do we tell our story in English? I think that's the biggest challenge for a non-native English speaker. So that's my question. That would be my answer. Because I think most of you will be able to do it in Indonesia. Tapi kalau bila kita nak ke bahasa English, mudah susah.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc. Is there any other question from the participants? Maybe raise your hand and ask directly. So actually, I also working on a paper, Doc, but yeah, take so long, yeah.
Zud, macam ni Zud, my suggestion, if you're all working on the paper, come and work with us together. Let me know when you're ready, and then we can sit down, and then we'll find some. And I think the best thing is when we work as a group. Susah kalau buat sorang-sorang, memang payah.
Yeah.
Memang susah.
But
kalau yeah, go on.
But you said you are very busy, Doc.
No. I'm very busy, but I've got a group of students that we can work. So we can have a separate discussion. You'll find out what your paper is about.
Yeah. About the farmer's life and adaptation strategies in the forest and peatland fires prone area.
Okay, let's have a chat and sit down and find a time where we can write. I'll be more than happy to help. I'm more happy to help. If I can find someone that can sit down with us, that'll be even better, so that we can work at it. How many people are there involved in this paper?
4, Doc. But
Okay, I'm happy.
actually, I am the most one that write the paper.
Have you
Doc.
got a final draft?
Yes, ready.
Send it to me, so and then if you want, I'm more than happy to help you, not to help you, but to work together and see what we can do. Let me have a read, and then we can, and then I can
Doc.
give. More than happy.
With my pleasure, Doc. Yeah.
More than happy to do that. And then I think the other thing, Zuhud, one of the things that we all need to do, and Laili udah angkat tangan tu.
Laili, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe Laili first, ya. Laili.
Yeah, okay, Laili. What's your question?
Okay.
Apa soalannya?
I'm sorry because my English is not really good, so I want to ask you in bahasa.
No, Laili, I think your English is good. Why don't you try and ask me in English?
No,
Give it a shot.
No.
Okay, go on.
Tadi kan dibilang kalau menulis itu posisikan diri sebagai pembaca. Nah, itu tipsnya bagaimana supaya kita itu menulis tapi pembaca itu dapat mudah memahami.
Okay. It is easier said than done. Mudah untuk dicakap. Oh, don't think of the reader, think of the reader. But and one of the things that I think you can do untuk mudah. Jadi saya mungkin soalan ni mungkin saya tak jawab dengan betul, tapi saya cuba jawab yang pertama ni. Satu pertama, untuk for you to move away and then come back and read it, right? Because when you move away from your paper and you come back to read it, quite often you'll be reading it like, I can't remember, because we don't remember what we write sometimes. Even after a week, you come back, you read the paper and you think, did I write this? So jadi bagus itu, that helps you to understand whether readers will understand it. If you can't understand it yourself, then there's a problem. Readers won't understand it, right? Now, how do you get readers to understand it, which I think is your question? Pertama, I think the lesson that was taught to me by my supervisors is this. A lot of us think that when we write a scientific journal article, the word scientific journal article, we think it's got to be very complex. It's far from the truth. Jauh dari apa kebenaran. It's far from the truth. Jauh dari kebenarannya. Sebenarnya, when you write a scientific journal article or an article, you are supposed to write in a more simple manner. You are supposed to write succinctly, meaning you don't write 20, 30 words in a sentence. You write 6, 7, 8, 10 words in a that means you want to be succinct. Succinct tu maksudnya apa ni bahasa Indonesia succinct?
Langsung.
Langsung. Langsung. Okay, succinct. That's a very important word. You'll hear that word all the time. So, writing a journal article in English is not about making it complex. The more complex you are, the further away you are from writing a good scientific journal article. It's about being simple. I'll give you an example. I wrote one whole paragraph to my professor when I was doing my PhD. In that paragraph, so saya tulis paragraph ni 50, 60, 70, 80 perkataan. Dia tulis satu sentence saja. Dalam satu sentence dia, udah merangkumi segala-gala yang saya nak cakap dalam 50, 70 tu. Jadi, that brought me back to, I said, now I realize, but it takes time to get there. Okay? Remember that. I just want students to remember that. It takes time. There is no training, there is no course, or there is nothing that will prepare you immediately like that. It's a process. And I always tell my students, even Adit, even when you go back, you're not going to be, even if you publish paper, you're still going to be learning. Ini kan kita hidup ni sentiasa belajar. Ya, sampai ke liang lahat kan, kita belajar. So, it's a process, so it'll take time. And I think, Lely, yang penting bila kita nak tulis tu, kita harus langsung atau succinct, kita harus simple. It's not about complex, it's about simple writing. Tapi simple ada batasnya. Jangan terlalu simple. Dan jangan tulis artikel macam tulis surat khabar. Surat khabar apa? Surat khabar newspaper. Newspaper itu surat khabar. Surat khabar. Masa kalau surat khabar, contohnya, this is the most amazing discovery. Jadi kalau udah digunakan perkataan amazing discovery, jadi kalau ini menakjubkan, nggak boleh gitu. Kalau scientific article, this is a significant finding. Nampak bedanya. Jadi kalau amazing itu bahasa yang diguna dalam newspaper, diguna dalam tabloid. Tapi kalau dalam scientific article, kita kena guna harus bahasa-bahasanya kena appropriate. Okay? And how do you know what's appropriate? How do you know what's good? By reading. Find a good journal article. So here's another tip, I think, for all students. If you are writing about value chain, for example, or ini topiknya apa, Zul? Student ni semua?
This course called scientific writing course, Doc.
Okay, what will be their title? It would be up to them in terms of their research.
Oh, for the book chapter, you mean?
Yeah.
About the agriculture and rural area and agriculture in urban area.
Beautiful. So
general, Doc, yeah.
General. Okay, here, students, what I suggest you do. First, number one, okay, I'm going to share. I think I'm very interested in doing this because, you know, for those of you who are still here, I bet you're here not because you want your attendance, you're still here because you want to learn. So this is what I want to share with you. I'll share you another thing, okay? So what's important is that, you know, when you go to, what am I going to show you? So I won't be able to show you this, but one of the things that you want to do is identifying a good journal. Okay, saya nggak tahu bagaimana kalau student-student Indonesia, kemungkinan besar dia nggak ada. So for me, I want to show you quickly. So for me, when I'm looking at, so here's for me. Contohnya pada saya, kalau saya masuk, saya guna Insights. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes, Doc. Yes.
Okay, can see my screen. Okay, I'll show you something. Okay, this is one of the tools that we in UQ, kalau saya jadi, if I want to look for journals, right, I don't want to take anything from any journals. You got to be careful what you read, because if you choose the wrong journal as a source, sekarang ni ada journal dipanggil predatory journal. Bayar $200, besok artikel udah keluar. Jadi there's no peer review, you know, there's no process. The article might be completely rubbish. So be careful what journals you see. So for us, so for me, for example, this is what my students, I tell them, okay, and I use my students because we have this discussion. We've got meetings on Monday. We discuss about papers. So I'll go into agribusiness, for example, okay? So as you can see, there's only 2 or 3. Agribusiness, unfortunately, is not a well-disciplined and kuat. Jadi impact factor pada agribusiness discipline nggak banyak yang ada kuat. Jadi you've got some journals like this one, International Food and Agribusiness, you've got agribusiness. So let's say I want to go agribusiness. I click on agribusiness. It will tell me about the journal. Okay, it will tell me about the journal. So here's one tip that you all can do. So if you all want to write about journal, it'll tell me what the journal impact factor is. So it's taking a little bit of time. There, it'll tell me the journal impact factor of 2020 is 2.057. And then it'll tell me how many citations. It'll tell me a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know why, but my computer is a little bit slow at the moment. It'll tell me if it's open access, and it'll tell me the rank. So you can see. So when you hear Adit talking about Q3, Q2, it'll tell me what rank this journal is. So for UQ, although it is encouraged that you publish in Q1, but it's okay to publish in other journals as you go on. There's something wrong with my internet. So as you can see, you've got Q3 journal. So in 2018, this was Q2 under different categories. Unfortunately, okay, my computer is a little bit slow, but this is one of the reasons, that one of the things that you can look at. So if you are doing about agriculture in urban areas, talk Zuhud, maybe you can give them examples of journals to look at. Choose a good article that you. So this is what everybody does, you know. They choose a good article and say, "Oh, I like this article. This is what I want to talk about." So let's say, for example, you find a journal article that talks about rural agricultural development in Nigeria. It was really nice, written from a good journal. And then you say, "Oh, I want to write something like this about Indonesia." You can do that. And that's what I normally encourage the students to do. Have a role model paper. Okay? That's another tip that I think I like to share. Have a role model paper when you're writing your paper. But remember that role model paper not to copy and paste. Ini bukan untuk copy paste. Ini untuk membagi idea bagaimana nak tulis, how to write, what structure did they use. They're talking about Nigeria. You're talking about Indonesia. Okay, but don't change the Nigeria to Indonesia. You want to change the whole thing. You just get the general structure. I think that would be a good thing. That would be a good step for the students to look at. Have a model paper. Okay, Zud. Any other questions?
Any other question? Maybe one more. One more question. Please raise hand. Okay. Laili already, yeah? Or maybe Laili want to give feedback?
Yeah, no problem. Laili, you got another question? More than happy to
No,
talk.
I agree with you, sir. Jadi mau bertanya sama Pak Aditya nih.
Ya.
Tadi kan bilang banyak kosakata bahasa Indonesia yang berbeda dengan bahasa Inggris aslinya. Nah, itu gimana caranya kita belajar kalau kita tidak punya teman yang emang benar-benar paham bahasa Inggris?
Ya, makasih. Jadi gimana ya? Jadi saya jawab berdasarkan pengalaman saya aja ya. Jadi memang yang masalah-masalah yang saya temukan waktu saya tulis paper saya itu ya memang Dr. Ahmad tadi udah bilang tentang English saya gitu ya. English saya emang yaitu tadi bahasa Indonesia yang diinggriskan gitu kan. Kadang completely different meaning gitu ya. Completely different meaning ini maksudnya gini, bukan artinya beda dalam bahasa Indonesia terus diinggriskan itu beda, enggak, sama mungkin, tapi penempatan katanya gitu. Kadang kita menggunakan kata apa yang tadi Dr. Amar udah jelaskan, kalau kita menulis itu kadang kan kita jangan pakai bahasa newspaper tadi. Kalau tadi Dr. Amar give example like amazing, kan? Kalau amazing itu kan kalau kita tulis di blog atau di newspaper atau di media-media yang sifatnya pengen menarik perhatian orang banyak, itu tepat. Tapi kalau di scientific paper kan bukan orang sembarangan yang mau kita tarik perhatiannya, yaitu komunitas-komunitas saintifik tentunya gitu kan. Makanya kita harus menggunakan bahasa yang tepat. Jangan pakai kata tadi amazing gitu. Mungkin kalau orang Indonesia bilang kalau kita pakai amazing tuh lebay gitu, terlalu berlebihan gitu, nggak tepat digunakan untuk di paper saintifik gitu. Jadi kembali lagi baca, dan untungnya tadi pertama juga udah presentasikan kayak Ludwig, terus juga saya biasa pakai juga ada word HIPPO, word HIPPO, itu coba silakan Google. Terus ada phrase bank, itu coba Google, itu bisa ngasih kita alternatif kata apa yang bisa kita pakai di scientific paper gitu. Jadi selain kalau cara saya nih, saya Google Translate tetap saya pakai gitu untuk kadang aduh keceplosan saya. Google Translate tetap saya pakai gitu, tapi kadang saya baca, oh ini kayaknya kurang tepat nih kalau dipakai di scientific paper. Terus saya pergi ke word HIPPO atau phrase bank. Saya cari alternatif katanya tuh apa sih gitu. Nah, setelah dapat itu, saya pergi lagi ke Ludwig gitu untuk mencari kata itu biasanya digunakannya gimana sih gitu. Proses yang dinamis sebenarnya. Itu untuk menciptakan satu kalimat.
Adit, itu untuk menciptakan satu sentence saja, Adit, ya?
Satu sentence saja.
So that's how much work it goes. There's no shortcut. Okay, there's no shortcut, students. It has a lot of work goes into one single sentence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pak Adit and Dr. Ahmad. Maybe we should finish this public lecture, ya, Dok, ya, because already Zuhur here. It's okay?
Yep, it is okay.
Yeah. Hanifah, can you take over?
Okay, sure, sir. Okay, sorry because there was problem with signal with my laptop. Thank you, Mr. Zaki, for helping to handle it, and I have permission to continue again for the next session. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we finally come to the end of the public lecture, because before I close the public lecture, I would like to take the conclusion from what the speaker has presented. From Dr. Amar, research. We have a research project planning. There are collaboration, mentor, communicative mind map, make a note, collect discussion, plan, and wrap up. And then for Mr. Aditya, we must read a lot, kemudian avoid direct translate, position yourself as a reader, involve your peers, and pay attention to details. Okay, since we already appreciate today a speaker, we would like to give a certificate for our speaker that will be given by Mr. Zuhud Rozaki, head of Department Agribusiness. In the this time is yours. Please, Shiva, help me to share screen a certificate.
Okay, I can share by myself.
Okay.
So wait. So thank you very much for Dr. Amar for accepting our invitation to be a speaker on public lecture, how to make a good scientific paper. And also we would like to thanks to Pak Aditya Kilos for inviting our invitation to us, the speaker on this today's public lecture. I think that's all. I give back to Hanifah.
Okay. To commemorate this moment, let us take a picture first. And we also request for participants to open your camera. I will get you from the first slide. Please open your camera for the participant.
Jangan ada yang tidur.
Jangan tidur, jangan tidur.
Okay. Please Shiva or Dia to share screen, to screenshot for this moment. Okay, untuk masih banyak yang belum nih.
Seadanya saja, enggak apa.
Okay. Okay, I will count 1, 2, 3. Cheers. Okay, for slide 2. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Cheers. Okay, for slide 3. 1, 2, 3. Cheers. Okay, thank you so much for our participant. Today's agenda is about to finish. Thank you so much for our speaker that already shared the knowledge about how to make scientific paper with us, and also for the participant will have enthusiasm in this public lecture. We also want to remind you to share our event on your social media and take Instagram of Department of Agribusiness at Agribusiness UMY. And don't forget to fill the attendance form by the link in the chat box. I am Hanifah Fadila, secretly say goodbye, and I hope you see you again. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Dr. Amar and Pak Aditya.
Terima kasih. Lain kali jangan lupa panggil lagi.
Ya, siap.
Siap.
Banyak kolaborasi, Dok, kalau bisa.
Insyaallah. Insyaallah bisa. I hope we show the students that we are going to collaborate together. I think that's how we can show them a good example of collaboration. So remember, muafakat membawa berkat. Okay, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih Pak Aditya. Saya
Terima kasih Mas Zud.
Ya,
makasih. Assalamualaikum.